I have two readings for us today. The first is by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his letter from a Birmingham jail dated April 16th, 1963. King writes, "My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Seldom do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. You asked why I am here in Birmingham. I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presentation of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." I'll repeat his last sentence in this paragraph. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. The letter in its entirety is nearly 700 words and is signed "Yours for the Cause of Peace and Brotherhood, Martin Luther King Jr." This next reading is from the Holy Bible, the English Standard Version. It is from Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 through 39. "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it."
Had anyone read or heard either of those readings before? Okay, a good handful. Was it kind of uncomfortable? Yeah, good. It's good to be uncomfortable a little now and then. I think it's what helps create an opening, for learning, for change, for transformation. Don't change a lot when you're just comfortable all the time. So a few weeks ago, I went to Atlanta for a conference. I promise this is not going to be what Minister did on their spring break. It was my first time to Atlanta, not just the airport. Although, if you've ever been to a conference, you know that you spend more time in the hotel than anywhere else. So I still don't feel like I can really say I've been to Atlanta. But the conference did plan some time for us to be outside of the hotel, which included a trip to the King Center for Nonviolence, founded by the wife of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, who was a great activist in her own right. She tends to be overshadowed by her husband's accomplishments. So it's a beautiful site. It's very powerful. There's some photos up there. Don't worry about reading them. This is just to sort of set the scene. So there's some there's a wall that has the principles of nonviolence on it. And there's also a reflecting pool that contains the crypt of Martin and Coretta King. I didn't take that photo. I know when I should just use a professional photo because I'm not that great of a photographer. But I learned from someone that Coretta Scott King was initially resistant to having some kind of tomb or crypt in that reflecting pool because she was worried that it would attract violence. And I do hear that it has been shot at before. And then we have the definition of beloved community. This photo is awful because I couldn't do anything about that giant shadow. But I will read it out loud because I do think that this is very important. So, the beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and conflict exist but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. In the beloved community, caring and compassion drive political policies that support the worldwide elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. The beloved community is a state of heart and mind, a spirit of hope and goodwill that transcends all boundaries and barriers and embraces all creation. At its core, the beloved community is an engine of reconciliation. This way of living seems a long way from the kind of world we have now, but I do believe it is a goal that can be accomplished through courage and determination, and through education and training, if enough people are willing to make the necessary commitment. So I wanted to read that out loud because in Unitarian Universalist congregations, we like to talk about beloved community a lot. A lot. Some of y'all are from other UU congregations. Would you agree? Yes? Yeah. But we don't always take time to define it. And it's important to define it so that we can all be on the same page about the end goal of whatever it is that we're doing here. This great experiment that is Unitarian Universalism is in service of this. A society in which problems and conflict exist, because we're always going to have problems and we're always going to have conflict, but they are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. It seems like it shouldn't be that hard, but it is hard. And a major obstacle to that vision, shared by both Reverend Dr. King and Coretta Scott King, was that people are simply not willing to make the commitment. Because building a peaceful world, a truly peaceful world, requires work. It requires challenging the status quo. It requires asking hard questions. It requires being uncomfortable. It requires making other people uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, sometimes they get angry. And when they get angry, they might do things like call you uppity, or call you a communist, or ask you, why are you being so divisive? You're just being divisive. They'll smash a window in your car. They'll spray paint your house. They'll make your work miserable till you quit. They'll spit on you, throw things on you, tear gas you, ignore your phone calls, scream at you to go back where you came from. You're not from around here, are you? We don't like people who aren't from around here. And that's if you're lucky, if that's all that happens to you, because, they did kill Dr. King. They did crucify Jesus. So it seems like if you love life, it's easier to not say anything, because I just want to live my life. I just want to keep my head down, not make any waves, do what I need to do, get out of here. And that's what results in this negative peace that Dr. King wrote about in his letter. This negative peace that is merely the absence of tension rather than the presence of justice. The world can seem like a peaceful place sometimes. I'm sure it seemed very peaceful to a lot of people in the antebellum South. But was it peaceful in the slave houses or in the fields? It seems peaceful here in Carteret County. I've heard a lot of people in this, around here describe this place as paradise. And it is a kind of paradise. I've seen dolphins, I've seen bald eagles, the beach is beautiful, the water is good, the seafood is good. It's quiet. Man, I'm not used to city noise anymore. Like when I go to the city and I, stay in an Airbnb or something, and I'm like, oh, it's so loud here. How did I sleep before? But is it peaceful for people of color? Is it peaceful for the homeless folks camped out behind the TJ Maxx? Is it peaceful for LGBTQIA people? Is it peaceful for the people who are killing themselves out of despair, overdosing on opioids? If it is not peaceful for everyone, then is it really peace? That's why it's such a common rallying cry that you can hear at protests that say, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Because justice is what is required for true peace. Because as long as people are oppressed, as long as this peace is achieved because you have your boot on someone else's neck, then it is not peace, because there is always something bubbling under the surface. And it will bubble up in violence, especially when it seems like there is no other way out. A Methodist minister came and visited me here in this church a few weeks ago, Pastor Joseph. He's new to St. James up in Newport. I showed him the sanctuary, and he looked around and he said, "Oh, I see peace is very important here." What do you think he saw that made him think that? Yeah, the batiks, the banners. I know, if you're in here long enough, you kind of stop seeing them because they just become part of the wall. But this is his first time here. His fresh eyes, deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining star to you. Deep peace of the running wave to you. So he said, I see peace is very important here. And I said, oh, yeah, I guess it is. So if peace is important to this congregation, then we must be serious about justice. And we do start with justice inside of this congregation, making sure that everyone has a voice, making sure that everyone has their basic needs met, making sure that we center the voices of the marginalized. We can and should get our house in order. And we also cannot start and end there, because the world has a way of coming to your door. Much as we can think of UCF as a bubble, it is still part of Carteret County, still part of the United States, still part of the world. And a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's something else that Dr. King said. When I visited the Levant, the Holy Land, what some people call the Holy Land, the Middle East, I met with some activists there who were very interested in the Black Lives Matter movement. This was in 2015, so the Black Lives Matter movement was very young then, and these Palestinian activists were interested. They were following it, and I don't know if you know very much about what's happening in Palestine, but they have a lot of their own problems there. There has been a lot of conflict there for, forever. And I was with a class. This was when I was in seminary, and so a good dozen of us were there going like, wow, it is nice of you to pay attention to, this little burgeoning movement in the United States, because it kind of seems like you have a lot going on here. So why are you so interested in Black Lives Matter? And they said, oh, because a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If it's okay to kill brown people in one part of the world, it is okay to kill brown people in another part of the world. And I was like, thank you for answering my very silly question so seriously. But that was a very sort of expansive moment for me. So if we're to be serious about peace, then we need to be ready for conflict. Dr. King and Jesus both knew that to be peacemakers, you had to be ready for conflict, because power cedes nothing without a struggle. That is what it means to be committed to beloved community. It means to be committed to the struggle, committed to stirring the pot, committed to asking hard questions, committed to making sacrifices, committed to agreeing, sometimes to disagree. Like, maybe that's the only thing that can happen here. Committed to doing the right thing. Committed to acting for the good of the collective and not just the good of the individual. Committed to respecting the rights of the individual too, because that's the hard balance to strike, is that we need to do what's good for the collective, and also we can't just run roughshod over individual rights either. Committed to being uncomfortable sometimes, so that someone else can be comfortable. Committed to starting over and over again in love, just like it says in our covenant. There are a lot of ways to act for peace, just like there's a lot of ways to say something, like in today's Time for All Ages. And thank you to all of you who helped. There are a lot of ways to act for peace, but you do have to act. You do have to be committed, or it's not going to happen. Peace does not happen by itself. And it needs to happen. This world, boy, does this world need peace. More than ever, we need peace. That's right, I like this outspoken interaction. Y'all feel free to do that anytime. You don't have to be quiet.
Amen.
Thank you. There we go. So now, on that note, I invite everyone to stay seated for hymn 1023 in the Teal hymnal, Building Bridges, which will have a couple of song leaders.
We're going to sing this through once together, and then we'll draw a line right down the middle of the church, and Karen's going to take